Hey everyone, it's Movie Lover 120 here, and I'm here with the episode 24 of my Halloween horror movie reviews, and this episode is going to be for a horror film from the 90s. And it's a slasher film, and it's one of Wes Craven's most notorious works, and it's my second favorite horror film of the favorite Wes Craven film, my second favorite horror film of the 90s, and that is, of course, for 1996's Scream. Released in 1996, during a time when the slasher genre or horror genre was really in a rut. This was pretty much the movie that saved the horror genre and kind of saved the slasher genre, revived and gave it new hope. Yeah, it was released around December 9th, 1996, made quite a big profit at the box office, became one of the most profitable horror movies in ages before Saw came along, and guaranteed three sequels. Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, but what is the plot of this movie about? Well, a year after her mother's death, Sidney Prescott, played by Neve Campbell, perfectly, and her friends started experiencing some strange phone calls. They later learned the calls are coming from a crazed serial killer in a white-faced mask in the shape of a ghost and a large black robe, looking for revenge, and goes by the name Ghostface. His phone calls usually consist of many questions, the main one being, "What's your favorite scary movie?" Along with much scary movie trivia, ending with bloody pieces of innocent lives scattered around the small town of Woodsboro. So yeah, easily, by far, perfect. So, like I have said, this is easily one of my all-time favorite horror movies ever. I think it's tied with Candyman as the best horror film of the 90s. And I would call this the best slasher film of the 90s too. And Wes Craven's, rest in peace, second best film behind A Nightmare on Elm Street. Scream is both self-aware and brutal at the same time as it pokes fun at slasher cliches and the bad parts of horror films. In fact, this whole franchise pokes fun at horror franchises in general. For example, Scream 2, released a year after the first film, pokes fun at slasher and or horror sequels. The abysmal Scream 3 pokes fun, unfortunately poorly, at final installments, tries to anyways. And Scream 4 pokes fun at why slasher remakes are never good. And this upcoming new film in January, I'm not too excited about, but hopefully this one can poke fun at direct requels that retcon other sequels. So yeah, this is a horror film I've been long meaning to review. Now let's take a look at it for this episode, and here are the good qualities of the first film. The good qualities in this are some great acting, especially from Neve Campbell, Drew Barrymore, despite not only appearing in the beginning scene of the movie, Roger Jackson, Skeet Ulrich, and Matthew Lillard. Yeah, I think I really like all the actresses' performance. Like, I don't think I could see any other chick playing Sidney Prescott perfectly other than Neve Campbell. I think Neve Campbell was just born to play the role perfectly. I especially also love David Arquette, Courtney Cox, Courtney Cox as a Galen Dewey. So Dewey were also born to play the roles. I especially like those two's chemistry throughout this franchise. And yeah, I think I like those two's character developments the most. Like, they go from this constantly like arguing couple to like they start to like get more and more developed as they grow. So yeah, they're my two. Those are two of my favorite characters in the franchise. An effectively creepy costume for the killer Ghostface. And speaking of Ghostface, guys, unlike most horror movie villains, Ghostface is not some demon or creature or already dead person. He's a normal human being and only uses a normal hunter knife. However, this only helps to make the situation more relatable and thus scarier. Some humorous in-jokes and self-aware characters. There's two and lots of horror movie references. Probably the most well-known is when Ghostface informs Casey, his first victim, that the killer in the first Friday the 13th movie was not Jason, but was his mother, which even to this day, a lot of people who haven't seen any of the Friday the 13th movies don't know about until they watch the franchise. It's also known for being one of the best movie satires of all time with all the cliches it makes fun of, and because it's able to make fun of so many horror movie tropes while still fitting perfectly fine with those tropes. A good soundtrack and the iconic opening scene involving Casey Becker, who was played by Drew Barrymore. In fact, Drew Barrymore was actually originally auditioned to play Sidney Prescott, but the studio decided to have her just play Casey Becker, thinking she was better for the role of Casey Becker, and becomes one of the first victims of Ghostface. Yeah. And I actually do also love her performance, even if her role's not that big in the movie. It's only for like 10, she's only in the movie for like 10 minutes, and she's like the first victim of the franchise and first victim of the movie in general. But I still thought she did a perfectly good performance as the first murder victim. While it makes fun of a lot of tropes, the movie also created and popularized the trope of the killer calling up on the phone, which is also used in various other 90s films like Speed with Howard Payne, The Rock with General Hummel, Air Force One with Ivan Korshunov, In the Line of Fire with Mitch Leary, and Dire with a Vengeance with Simon Gruber, etc. Some people also humorously stated that the movie even forced people to get caller ID. Yeah, and since this movie did so well at the box office, almost made over 200 million worldwide, and before Halloween 2018 came out, this was the highest grossing slasher movie of all time. It kickstarted one of the most popular horror movie franchises in the modern age. It's one of the few rare horror franchises where when only one of the movies is bad. Just one of them. And even the bad one is better than in a lot of any of the cash grab horror sequels that come out. So yeah, in a way, this is actually one of the best horror franchises out there. And these memorable quotes, and such as like I already mentioned, Ghostface's most famous question on the phone. And of course, let's not forget the quote, "Not in my movie." Yes. And as for, yeah, those are pretty much the good qualities and why this film is a phenomenal horror film. As for the bad qualities of this film, I think there's only one bad quality in this film, which I could easily ignore since it's only one. And that bad quality for me would be that while the pop culture references are still memorable, they could get a bit dull at times. Then again, it's meant to satire horror films. As for now when it comes to my thoughts on the sequels, my opinions on the sequels vary. Scream 2, released in 1997, 1 year after the first film, is not as good as the first film, but I still enjoy it. It's still a very great sequel. I like how it makes fun of all those bad horror sequels and why some horror sequels just never work. Scream 3, I was not a fan of because I did not like the direction it took. I would watch it over several other bad horror sequels I've had to sit through. Or several other bad finales I've had to sit through. And Scream 4, I actually enjoyed as much as 1 and 2. Actually, because I really loved the twist of Scream 4 with the killers specifically. Like, I'll get into Scream 4 a little bit here before I wrap up this review. Scream 4, we all know, takes on remakes. Takes on the bad stuff of remakes. And at first you suspect, when you watch Scream 4, you suspect the killer to be this guy, because this guy that harasses the female characters throughout the film, he acts all douchey, so of course he would look like the Ghostface killer. I could predict him being the Ghostface killer. However, no. When it comes to Scream 4's killer, the killer that gets revealed in the fourth one is the character you least expect. Yeah, the one you'd least expect to be Ghostface killer. So I really loved that twist for Scream 4. It's a perfect way to turn the tables on the audience. But anyway, back to the first one. I'll review the sequels likely around a little closer to when the fifth one comes out. Because I'm speaking of the one, if you're asking me about my thoughts on an upcoming film in January, I'm not very excited for it, but I hope this does end up surprising me. Because they have said it's not going to be as meta. It's not going to it's not going to retcon the others as much, so at least that'll be, but it just doesn't feel the same without Wes Craven. Rest in peace to him. We know he's gone, but it's not going to feel the same without him, but hopefully these guys that are directing it can still match the tone of Wes Craven. I really hope they still do. So, final thoughts. If you have not seen this film yet, go check this film out if you're getting into horror. It's a perfect way if you're just getting introduced to horror movies, this is a perfect way to start off. If you're getting introduced into slasher movies, in fact, this was actually the very first slasher movie I ever saw when I was getting introduced to horror. This was the film that introduced me to the slasher genre. It's a perfect way to get introduced to the slasher genre if you're starting to become interested or get introduced to horror films. Yeah, it's easily my favorite slasher film of the 90s and my second favorite horror film of the 90s. And here's how I'm going to rank it. I am going to give Scream a 9.5 out of 10. And there we go. That wraps up my review for Scream. So, what's going to be the very next episode? Well, our next episode is going to be for the very first rated R horror movie I ever saw. The movie that introduced me to horror. It was a film released in 1999, was directed by Tim Burton, and stars Johnny Depp. Yes, you guys, The Headless Horseman, Sleepy Hollow, is next. Yeah, so I can't wait to talk about that because that was actually, believe it or not, guys, the very first horror movie. That was a movie I first saw when I was finally getting introduced into the horror movie genre. So, that'll be the first episode. Until then, that'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching. And if you like this and want to see more, don't forget to like, subscribe to Movie Lover 120.